Hello and g'day! In today's video, I'm going to show you how to finish the cover for our Recycle a Book cover for a junk journal. In part 2, I showed you how to finish off the inside of the recycled cover. Then in part 3, I showed you all about how to gather up the paper for the pages and cut them out and get them ready into 3 signatures. We've got 3 here. And in part 4, I showed you how to sew these signatures into this book. So we've got 3 stitch lines here. And now all that's left to do is cover the book. There's nothing wrong with leaving this like this. If you wanted to go ahead and use the book like this, you could call it finished. What you could also do with this journal is call it finished if you just wanted to write in it. You would need to do nothing more. You could just start writing in it. It's ready to go. But if you wanted to turn it into a junk journal where you wanted to add pockets and tuck spots and little tags and all the ephemera that you see everybody else adding into their journals, you could do that as well. Today, I'm just going to show you how to put a very simple cover on top of this recycled book cover. Before I start to show you a very simple way to cover this cover, I want to say something to you. If you want to be as good as Gail Agostinelli, Wendy and Leo, Artie Mays, or Tracy Fox, you need to practice. You need to start off simple. This is a simple book. I haven't filled it with all complicated pages. I haven't made it where some pages are short, some are tall, some are long this way. I haven't done any of that. I've kept it very simple. There's a reason for that. If you start off simple, it's the same as learning how to drive a car. You've got a lot of things to think of. You've got to watch the other traffic. You've got to put your blinker on. You've got to put your foot on the clutch. You've got to put your foot on the brake. You've got to put your foot on the accelerator. You've got to listen to the person sitting beside you who is giving you instructions on how to drive. You've got to watch the road. You've got to watch the curb. You've got to watch pedestrians. You've got to watch other drivers, all at the same time. The same goes for junk journaling. The same goes for making a junk journal book. It's exactly the same. Don't overload yourself. Don't think that you are going to be as good as Gail and Wendy straight off the bat, because chances are you're not, and then you're going to disappoint yourself. So put your L plates on. Accept that you are a beginner and that you need to learn all this stuff. And it might take you a couple of goes. It takes you months to learn how to drive a car. So let this take you a little bit of time to learn how to do. Doesn't matter if all your holes go in crooked the first time you do it. The next time they'll be straighter, and the time after that they'll be straight again. Don't worry about it. Then move up. Once you get that step right, the next time you'll be on your P plates. And then you get better and better before finally you get your full license and you'll be making something that you're pretty happy with. It turns out even at the top and the bottom, and you're going to be glad that you stuck with it. So understand why I'm making this a very simple tutorial for you to follow along with. Once we're finished this, we'll take it up a notch and you can start learning how to do the more difficult journals. But be kind to yourself and don't expect too much from yourself when you're beginning. I have got a piece of canvas type fabric that I got here in Australia from Spotlight. It's a plain fabric, and what I've done to the inside is I've used a printed fabric, and that's this one here. This fabric and this fabric go together. So I can go ahead and I can put this on the cover, and that would eliminate me having to worry about, you know, what I have to do to fancy it up, right? But just say I didn't have this and I only had this. What I could do is I could use the raw edges and turn them into a feature, because another thing with junk journaling, we don't have to be neat. I could use the plain fabric to stamp on. This is a cling stamp, and I just stamp this butterfly on. I could get the cling stamp and I could stamp that directly onto the fabric. That's one way. So you could actually make your own printed fabric by using your stamps. You could do what I've done here and fussy cut your stamp out and then do some hand embroidery on it. These are little grub knots, and mind you, first time I've done them. So I just done a crash course on that. That's a chain stitch. First time I've done that too. That's just a running stitch. So it's nothing great, but it looks okay. And I didn't overdo it. I just wanted a little bit here and there. And I deliberately frayed my edges when I cut it. And that's giving me a nice applique, if you like. Something that I can use if I want to. That's one option. I'll show you what I am going to do today. If you didn't want to have this fabric this short, just buy a longer length. I just bought a minimum piece from Spotlight. You could buy a little bit more and have it longer than your book. To fix that, I would just turn it sideways, but I would have to have my book covered in 3 pieces. I'd have to cover the front, the back, and then the spine separate. This way, I can have it covered in one piece, the front, the spine, and the back. I like the contrast of the black edge showing here. So I'm just going to do that. So I'm going to cut it here. Now I don't want it to be too short, so I'm going to cut it in a generous fashion so that I know it's not going to be too short. And then once I've cut this piece here, the last thing I want is for it to be just that little bit too short. So I'm going to square that by measuring it. Make sure I've got the same length. I'll get my rotary cutter and I'll cut that off. Now I can fit this again just to make sure that I've got the right length. So it's much easier to do a test fit once it's cut. You can see that it's too long. So now it's much easier for me to trim it. Another thing you'll notice when you're recycling a book cover like this, see how it's longer there and shorter there? When you're using a recycled cover, it may not be square. So it may not be perfectly even from there to there and there to there, because over time it's gone a little bit skew-if in its lifespan. So I only need to take off a tiny little bit off that to get it back into the inside of the cover so I can see a bit of that black cover showing. So just test fit your book to make sure it is square. Don't cut it too short. And that's better. So now I've got the black border showing at the front and at the back. Now when I start to glue the fabric onto this cover, I'm going to use the Helmer fabric glue. It's really good for gluing fabric to paper, but this is a book cloth, so it's going to grab really, really well. If you're worried about the glue seeping through the fabric, You can always turn your piece of fabric into a book cloth. That will help to stop the glue from seeping through the fabric. So check out this video. I'll put the link below for you to have a look at that, and you can make your own book cloth. Before you commit to gluing the fabric onto your cover, decide whether or not you want to mess up your edges, whether you want to put a stitch around the edge first and a decorative stitch. This particular piece of fabric is bigger than my cover, so it actually comes out further than the edge. This one is smaller than my cover, so I'm not going to get exactly the same look. Similar, but shorter. So what I could do, if I was going to fray it and stitch it, I would put my stitch line around first and then fray it, because I could fray it back to the stitch line. This being a canvas, I'm not going to turn it into a book cloth. If it was a very lightweight fabric, say if it was a cotton like that, I would certainly be turning that into a book cloth before I glued it onto here. For one, I can see the black through it, and two, the glue would definitely come through this cloth. So I would definitely be turning this into a DIY book cloth. So let's get started, and I'll show you how to make a very simple cover to put on top of this cover. I'm just going to go to my sewing machine and just do a rough edge stitch around this cover here, and I'll be back. When I glue this down, I'm not going to glue it past the stitches. So that's going to be a good help for me as well, because that way, I think what I'll do is I'll come along and I'll fray after I've done that. So that way the fraying won't be in my road. So I'm not going to have any edges to worry about while I'm gluing. So for this particular cover, I'm going to start gluing from the front. I'm going to put it on the cover. The reason I'm not going to put it on my fabric is because I don't want it to soak through the fabric. So I'm going to start off by actually placing it on the cover. And I'm going to place it back a little bit because I know my cover's not as big. I'm not going to go overboard. I'm not going to have a big mess to clean up, and I'm going to put it into the groove here. Need to work pretty quickly with this fabric glue because it does dry fast. I'm just going to have some non-stick paper ready here, and I've got a scraper. So I'm just going to spread it out a little bit. Oopsie, don't get any on the edge, keeping it to the inside. You want it pretty well covered. See what I mean by how quickly it dries? You don't have the luxury of taking your time with it. You can always put your paper on here and then start putting your cover down here. That allows you to get it straight and get that nice even edge, top and bottom. I'm going to turn it around here so I can see it a bit better. So I've got it nice and straight here, and I've got it nice and straight here. I'm just going to move that paper out of the way a little bit. Back a bit. And I'm just going to gently flatten it down onto that glue. Making sure that I'm staying square with my fabric. Squaring it up, top and bottom. Because if I go crooked here, it's going to go crooked all the way around. So you need to make sure that you're staying level with the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to push my fingers into the hinge here. You can see that happening there. You can use your bone folder. If you don't think there's enough glue in there, now is a good time to add a little bit more. But Don't go overboard. It will come through your fabric. If it does come through your fabric, we will just cover it up. Now's the time to come back to here, keeping away from these ends because I'm not covering them. And we're going to put some glue along the stitches. This is going to help reinforce the stitches. If I put a glue line there, that's going to help me remember not to go past it. You can use your fingers if you haven't got a scraper. Make sure it's joined from the last area of glue that you used here, this bit here. Flip it over, keeping that nice and level there and there. I've got that nice fold line. This is mostly the way the book is going to work. That way, that's pretty good. And just check, oh look at that, that's going to work out quite well for me there. See, once I've glued that and flattened that out, I've got that nice little bit left over on the back side. I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to use my paper method. More glue here. This area here is where you don't want your cover to come undone. So I'm coming back inside. And I'm going to glue everywhere again and spread that back to the inside so I don't have any ridges. Going from the inside to the inside. Paper on there if you need to. And down into that groove. Keeping parallel again, exactly the same we did to the front. Off. It's up to you how much of this paper method that you use, if you need to use any. It's a good way to get it nice and straight. How's that? So I didn't need to fray all them edges first because they're going to fray all by themselves. I'm going to just get my fabric down into the hinge again. I want that to show up. And I'm going to keep coming back and pushing that fabric into that hinge because I want it to be noticeable to a point, and I still want it to be functional. I'll turn it around and do it. So if I just keep doing this every couple of minutes between now and when the glue dries, it'll eventually just stay there. See how it's wrinkling at the spine there? That's because it's still wet. So now I'm going to walk away and I'm going to leave that to dry. But if I keep on opening that book now, it's going to wrinkle and it's going to stay wrinkled. Okay, so I'll let that dry and I'll come back shortly. So you can see that it's all going really well. And so far it's just plain and it still looks all right because we've used the background of the book, the contrast of the black and this nice beige fabric. It works well. So let's get on with it. I'll show you a couple of different ways that you could change this from plain to pretty. Now here's my idea number one, and that was using the stamped fabric. And my idea number two was just fussy cutting out the stamped fabric, and you would then glue that down on here. Idea number 3 to bring this together would be to use this same fabric here on the spine. So I've got a couple of pieces that I've ripped before for something else. See how the colours still all work? So I could get another piece and glue that around the spine and just have that sitting there like that. And the glued part would stop just before all this fraying. So that would make for quite a nice book cover as well. I've also made a feather. I've stamped the feather on the same cloth here, and I've coloured it with a bit of distress ink, and I've stitched around the edge and frayed it. So that could work, and you could glue that over the top somewhere, wherever it looked right, and you could just then put a piece of fabric here and another plain piece somewhere like a book plate over the top of that. So that was your book plate, plain piece there, and write journal, or take that away and that away, and see the stitches match. I've used the same colour thread. You could make your book plate with no name on it and just glue that down there. Do it like that. You know, depending on which way you like things to be orientated, you could put it up into the corner. You know, there's so many variations of simple designs. These little pinholes are what hold down the edge of the fabric when they weave the fabric. So it's on this edge and it's on this far edge. So a machine holds down both ends of the fabric. So you can use that as a decorative piece as well. So you could glue that down there. I've cut it off one end because I didn't want to waste it. And you could glue that there. This piece here has got the whole length, so I could use that as well. But just say I did decide to use it on here and I've got 2 lengths now, all you have to do is glue something over the top of it to finish that off, and you would never know it was joined underneath. That's one thing. Now, just say if you had an Instagram account, I put a little hashtag stitch on another piece of offcut, and you could just glue that over the top. Now that just changes it totally. Here's another little offcut piece, and I've got a butterfly that was left over from one of my snippet rolls. It's like a lace trim. I just cut one butterfly off. I've got the same in the little flowers. I've stenciled this piece and it's given me a little bit of a different colorway, and just cut one flower off and glue that on there. Cut one butterfly off and glue that on there. If I wanted to, I could use the snippet roll. I'd leave the lace here hanging over the top and use that as a decoration. If I was to put the butterfly there in the join, that would look okay. Put the flower there in the join. It just changes things straight away. And put a book plate here. I think I better grab a book plate and show you what it would look like. Let's just put this one on here. So it doesn't need a lot more. I don't mind it looking plain. Just goes to show what you can do with a plain piece of fabric. These are Tim Holt's book plates. He uses the best marketing paper, so we can always use his marketing paper, and I would actually put that on there. I think that looks pretty good. And I haven't even frayed the edges yet. Forgot, I'm going to show you that. I just grabbed my pokey tool and start fraying. Try not to scratch your book. See how it's getting a really long thing happening there? Get your scissors if you want it to, fray out and look a bit different, and just cut some of those off. So you could just snip in there, just snip it just before the stitches, so you get some shorter bits and longer bits. So it's not all the same, so it doesn't have one really long frayed edge. And see how much more interesting that is? You don't have to fray it all the way. Get some corner frays there and just leave them. Just use your fingers, your fingernail, pull a few out. You don't have to pull them all the way, just pull them from the middle and let them sit there. And we're getting somewhere. So all I've got to do now is just make a decision as to which one I'm going to settle with. So let me think about it a little bit more. Will I? Bit of antique linen maybe and a stencil. Let me have a look. Oh, this stencil will be perfect because it's got big open areas. It's just full of leaves. I'm using the antique linen distress ink because it's light in colour and I want this to be subtle. I'm applying the distress ink with a makeup brush, and it's best because you can get it light and dark. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. It looks great. I'll do the back now. Remember to turn the stencil over so it's a mirror image. To do the spine, I'm just going to do random partial leaves, and the makeup brush is perfect for this because I can just get in without having to curve the stencil. I'm just doing a hit and miss. I'm going to start with the side piece here and glue it down. I'm using Helmer fabric glue. I get this from Spotlight, and the equivalent is the Fabri-Tac. I'll add the shorter piece at the bottom, trim it off, and then fray it. And I do the same on the top bit too. I'll glue on the embellishment, and I'm going with this subtle little hashtag snippet. I think this will lay flatter if I cut it first. I'll fray the edges and I'll do them in a really rough way. And I'll glue the two pieces together. It'll lay flatter that way. I'm putting the glue on the back side and I'll glue this down directly onto the book. And this is going to go underneath the book plate. I left the marketing paper on the back of the book plate because it looks so good. And I'm just going to glue this directly on top of this little fabric piece. I don't worry about the rivets because I've glued them in place. So that's less work again. I'll trim these frayed bits off that are a bit too long and a bit too straggly. And we're done. You've just learned how to make a naked journal. I think you'll agree that this way of making a cover is so much easier for you to do than making a cover that you need to bring the cover to the inside and miter the corners. Thanks so much for tuning in to this 5-part series. I know it's going to help you all so much. I will be doing another series of a more, probably an intermediate stage of making a junk journal. I'm not 100% sure of which style I'll do, but we'll definitely do one where we put the cover, the fabric cover over the top of the book before we sew in the signatures. We'll be doing something like that. So we'll step it up a notch. Stick around for the flip through and check out my website. I've put more photos and a listing if you'd like this journal. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching and bye for now.
Give me your strength and show me your weakness. We're in this together now. We're in this this together now. Give me your love and tell me your secrets. 'Cause we're in this together now. Yeah, we're in this together now. No, no, no. I'll keep you safe, I'll give you my everything. Even if we're falling down, even if we're falling down, all of me is yours, every part of me. 'Cause we're in this together now. You and me together now. What's the point of living if we're scared to lose each other? What's the point of living without you? Tell me now and I'll stop fighting. Tell me now and I'll stop breathing. I don't want to be here without you. Without you. Without you. Without you. Without you. No, 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 no. I'll be your light, I'll keep you from darkness. Even when the sun don't shine, even when the sun don't shine. Give me your strength, show me your weakness. 'Cause we're in this together